Hi, I'm Rob Penzak.
And I'm Elizabeth Cornwell.
Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Now, if you guys would like to contribute to the show, we're going to throw up a graphic down on the bottom there. We're working on setting up a PayPal account to make things easier, but for now you can send a check to that, and that will get to us and help us finance the show and do cool things with it. Elizabeth, you want to start us off with some news?
Yeah, there's a few things going on. As all of you know, it is now the start of the holiday season. It starts a little before Halloween with the Christmas catalogs arriving in our mail. And of course, if you've gone outside shopping, you know that all the stores have their Christmas decorations up. And pretty soon it'll be Black Friday and all those wonderful shopping days. And of course, publishers have a great time in trying to get you to buy their book, their author's book, for the Christmas holidays. And one of our favorites, Sarah Palin, has come up with her book. It'll be on the market on this coming Tuesday. The title of her book, Good Tidings and Great Joy, Protecting the Heart of Christmas. Yes, Sarah Palin, with her guns and her ammunition, will be protecting Christmas for all of us. The New Yorker managed to get a few, New York Magazine, sorry, not New Yorker, managed to get a few wonderful little quotes from her book, and I'd like to share them with you. One, an angry atheist with a lawyer is one of the most powerful persons in America. Now, I like the sound of that, so we'll give her a couple of points for that one. Atheism's track record makes the Spanish Inquisition seem like Disneyland by comparison. That sounds a little dicey, but I think maybe she's trying to refer to the usual old hoary tales of, Hitler and Stalin and all of those who may or may not have been atheists, and of course we know the argument that is presented with that. This one I particularly like, being a Darwinian. I bet Charles Darwin never understood this. If the world could be described as truly survival of the fittest, why would people collectively be stricken with the spirit of generosity in December? Yes, touched by an angel sounds like it. And of course, again, a complete misunderstanding of what survival of the fittest actually means. One, it was coined by Spencer, never by Darwin. And two, survival of the fittest is really not a great term, because most people think of fitness as going and working out in the gym, being fit and strong, when that's not what fitness means. Fitness, in the way we think about it from an evolutionary perspective, is of course fit to survive your environment, and that those genes that help you survive that environment are passed on to the next generation. So we'll have to deduct a few points for that one. There's so many, I can't list them all, but this one I really do like. Many on the left see faith and family as oppressive, but the right sees them as indispensable. I'm really not sure of anybody I know, left or right, who believe family is oppressive, but I guess she has some evidence for that somewhere. She also makes note that it is Christ who empowers every act of goodwill toward men in our otherwise fallen hearts. So those Americans out there, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, anybody that isn't Christian, that probably includes Catholics and Mormons, and of course atheists. Well, we're just fallen, there's no goodwill, we can't do anything right. So I would suggest, rather than perhaps putting Palin's book on your list, you might find something a little bit better to read. But at least we have a little bit of fun now, poking fun of Sarah, which is always an easy thing to do, but I couldn't let this one pass.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the saddest things about that is I tend to look for Sarah Palin, such an intellectual giant, that when I need to understand philosophy a little bit better, that's who I turn to. I would want to race out there, get her book, read. It's a little bit funny. You have atheists. I think that Richard Dawkins made this point, I might be mixing up, that none of us say that social Darwinism should be how we structure our society. So, right, that was Spencer. It wasn't Darwin that said it, but in terms of that mode of cutthroatness, we're not advocating that.
No.
Atheism does not entail humanism, but certainly a lot of atheists, as opposed to religious fundamentalists, are humanists, and we want to help support people and support society.
Right.
So it's funny to see her fling that kind of feces at the atheist community when, we're not social Darwinists.
No, we're not. We're certainly not. And Darwinism, of course, can explain why people are kind and generous and take care of one another. It's completely within the understanding of how evolution works and how selection works. Another piece of news, if you all get a chance, please go to the Richard Dawkins website and watch the debate between Richard Dawkins and Deepak Chopra that was last night in Mexico City. If you really want to enjoy being bamboozled by one of the greatest charlatans of our time, Deepak has a way of mixing up metaphors and mixing up terms of science like quantum theory and all kinds of good stuff to bamboozle people and confuse them, to obfuscate, as Richard likes to point out. And it can be found on our website, www.richarddawkins.net. Please pay a visit and watch it. It's about an hour long, and it's quite interesting.
Well, I think that's a great segue into today's guest. I want to introduce these old friends, Richard Haynes and Elizabeth Cornwell, as Father Time and Mother Nature, but then she didn't really mean old friends, just very good friends. So we were lucky I got to meet Richard Haynes a few weeks ago when Richard Dawkins was in Fairfax doing the show, and Richard agreed to come back. He's worked with some of the great charlatans of all time, I suppose. So if we can bring Richard up, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you very much. How are you?
We're doing well.
We're doing great, Richard. Good to see you.
Great to see you guys. I'm updating my Christmas list here, so no to the Palin book.
Right.
Or Robin, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Amazon does refunds, right?
Yeah.
Right,
if you've already purchased it, you can send it back.
And I have Jewish heritage, so if I could get 8 presents, that would be great.
I will do what I can.
Maybe for people that don't know you too well, you can start off just by giving us a little bit of your background story, work in there how you crossed paths with Richard Dawkins at some point.
Well, I haven't always been a atheist. I wasn't a Christian before that. When I was born, I was pretty much an heathen kid. Didn't really have any religion in my home. Kind of thought it all was silly. My mom's family was Catholic. My dad's family were all Methodist, which meant I never went to church at all. Had pretty messed up family, to say the least. Ended up running away from home. And since you can't ever get a sandwich from somebody without them telling you about Jesus, I was able to create that little God box, and I tried it out. I asked Jesus in my heart. Had a very physical experience. It really did change my life. I think we understand all of this now psychologically, but it made a big impact on my life. And so I was able to put all my little reason aside, and I loved Carl Sagan and whatnot, but I put it all aside, asked Jesus in my heart, most immediately became an evangelist, ended up going to Bible college, becoming an associate pastor, crossed paths with several of the fellow evangelists, I guess. Then slowly, over several years, there was a big scandal in our church, big surprise. Wife and I left the church, took about another 10 years or so, and then we ended up acknowledging our atheism and allowing reason to get into a little God box that we created. And ever since then, I guess I've been preaching for the other team, I guess I should say.
Yeah, it's journey, and a brave one, I think. Was it difficult, in terms of the difficulties you faced in getting rid of that God box and breaking down the God box? What was the most frightening thing for you? Was it actually giving up God, or was it giving up the social things that went along with it? Or give us a little bit more information on that.
Well, when we first left the church, we were still believers, so we lost the social stuff first, and that was horrifying. It was horrible. We didn't have anything. We, like when my daughter was born. Can y'all hear me? Y'all break
Yeah,
up?
we're trying to fix a little bit of that. We're having a hard time. They're fixing the audio as best we can. So you can keep going ahead for another minute. We'll let you know if we hit fix.
Yeah.
Okay, we lost the social aspect of things first, so it was very difficult. And then when I started doubting, the whole idea of hell was horrifying, to say the least, and that kept me there for a while. So both of them were equally bad, but ultimately is the social aspect of things, because that, we're social creatures, and that we had a small child at the time, and it was a real terrifying time for us.
I think one thing we need to keep in mind, and Dr. Peter Boghossian talks about this, but that religious people, first of all, they're not dumb, and we shouldn't treat them with scorn or anger because they've been infected by the faith virus or because they were brought up in a certain way. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit too. I guess you come from a perspective where you said religion, whether it was true or not, which I think now we all agree that the faith was not a good way, it did help get you through a bad time. And talk some more, because some people actually lose their spouse as they walk away from faith. It really does take a lot of courage to pursue the truth. And how do you try to help people cope with that and deal with that? Does Atheist Nexus give those people a place to come to meet other people going through the same problems?
Yeah, we try to provide that for them. Nexus has been a great way for people to not have to necessarily come out of the closet, can be open to, find out people in the community who have the same belief system as them. It's a really rough thing. I every day deal with people, and especially ex-ministers who can lose spouses, and it's such a difficult thing. Elizabeth is one of the creators, as we know, of the Out campaign, and I think that has helped a lot. And the more we can encourage people to come out of the closet, the more we can change things. Nothing changed with the acceptance in the homosexual community until we were, until when you heard a preacher saying something negative about a gay person, say, well, my uncle's gay, he's not that bad, he's a pretty good guy, I don't know what this guy's talking about. And as long as we just let the loud atheists be the only ones that people hear, we're still going to get this negative press as well. So we've got to come out of the closet. The support factor is what people need the most.
Getting back to that, going back to when you said you weren't raised in a religious home, very religious home. You started going down the wrong road, and you ran away. The people who helped you were people who came from a religious background, and of course you had to, in order to get your meal, you had to talk about Jesus too. It makes me wonder, the atheist community doesn't have support structures like that, or non-religious. I don't even want to say atheist community, I just want to say sectarian support for kids in trouble don't really exist. We don't have that sort of safety net for them. And I think that that's a huge concern. And what are your thoughts on this and trying to, should we pursue this as an atheist organization? Or is it something that we should push for the government to provide more help, which of course they're so willing right now to help everybody. So, just what are your thoughts?
Well, that's something I think about all the time. The great thing about faith is a great circuit breaker. When you can't handle life, and things are falling apart around you, you can flip that switch and say, I trust God. And it's a great thing in the community around you. It's tremendous. I always say, you've heard me say this before, that people always say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, as atheists, we know there is no baby. The baby doesn't exist, but there is value in that bathwater. That bathwater is what saved me. That was the people around me, the traditions, the services. All these things were tremendous. First 2 weeks after our daughter was born, we had people bringing us meals. We didn't have to worry about food. If you're going to move, people were there. If you're in the hospital, people showed up. Now, that wouldn't necessarily tie to atheism, since that's just a lack of belief. You would tie to humanism or secular communities of some sort, but we desperately need it. I can honestly say if it wasn't for the church, I'm pretty sure I would not be alive right now. And that's with all the BS, because they did provide that. Maybe going to a shrink and getting some prescriptions would have helped a lot, but I don't know if it would have done for me what they were able to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that one way or another we need to provide some kind of social support system for people that are struggling. That's something that religious communities do, and Elizabeth, I think that's a great idea. I think that really is something that the secular community should try to get out there. I think places like that have the breadth and capacity, like Richard Dawkins, Atheist Nexus, it's hard to do this piecemeal with just tiny little groups. You really need to provide a net for the entire society, and we appreciate the stuff that you guys do with that.
And it's not for everybody. I mean, you always get the people who are complaining about, trying to create an atheist church or doing something like that. It's not for everybody. Some people might not like it, but that doesn't mean we have to fight and argue about things. Elizabeth and I both have been in meetings where people will argue about, I want to feed the homeless, or I want to do something with military, and we'll fight and fight. Instead of just say, okay, well, you feed the homeless, we'll take care of the military, and we have a common goal. Let's just all get along. Right. But, there's a lot of people who don't like it. There's a lot of, especially traditional or the establishment of atheism, aren't really into social activity. In fact, community used to be a really bad word to even bring up. But for those who do want it, something needs to be created. We need to fill in that gap. We need to find, okay, what are we going to do if we wake up tomorrow and religion is gone? Who's going to marry us? Who's going to bury us? What are we going to do for holiday? All these great things that we experience culturally. And I think we're just now on the precipice of being able to figure that out.
Yeah, I think with organizations like the Clergy Project, we're starting to get some momentum. And I think I'm going to take some disagreement with you about it taking someone like a Richard Dawkins or Atheist Nexus, not to denigrate either of them, to get these kinds of things going. But when you think about it in terms of how churches do it, they're actually doing it on a local level. Think globally, but act locally. And getting organizations to get together through meetup groups and make it as part of their meetup to simply go and do something. Create some way of connecting with kids that are having difficulties, or helping to feed the homeless, or going into hospitals and talking to people who don't have family there. I mean, there are all kinds of things that we can do on a local level. And it's encouraging people to take time out of their day in order to do it. The one disadvantage we have as atheists is we don't have this great guy in the sky looking down at us, shaking his finger, saying, you should be doing this. And so while we talk about, we're like cats and hurting us is difficult, the fact is what we don't have is this powerful, godlike person who will decide our eternal fates based on the way we act and what we do and how much we tithe. And how can we counter that in the secular communities?
Yeah, I guess you're right that things are done at a local level. I completely see the value and importance of people doing that. I guess I'm just trying to say that we really need this broad network, and so if you're very devoted and you somehow take out your time and you go help in a hospital, you go help with whatever, that's great for your local area, but we somehow need to broaden this as a goal across our country, across the world. We all need to be helping each other, and I think some kind of organization is important to pull everybody together and say, here's a bunch of things we all need to work at. It goes both ways, like the local people are doing it, but I think it also does help to have an overarching organization to organize things.
Yeah, it's finding that. I think
I don't think the community is set up now. I don't think any of the current organizations probably can even fulfill that. It's something else that's going to happen, probably from a groundswell of some sort, some type of organization. To be honest, it doesn't fit many of the national organizations, right. Their goals and their mission statements, and that's totally fine. and they shouldn't change them unless they feel it necessary. But I think something will happen, and there's a few things starting to begin. And it's not just about it. We should stress it's not just about an atheist church. That's not necessarily something that will be for everyone. That might be a part of it, but just on the community, just being there and taking care of somebody, reaching out.
I mean, one of the things we see with countries such as in the Scandinavian countries and a lot of the European countries where there's great government support to help people such as kids in trouble and women who are struggling trying to raise a child. I mean, there's daycare, there's all kinds of networks for these people to go to, and we see the decline in religion. And I'm wondering if you and I have talked so many times about the political ambitions of the religious right, and that we have tended to poo-poo them and thinking that they're all a bunch of dopes, but they're not. And I'm curious, what do you think about the fact that they realize too that if the government steps in and provides things like health care and psychological care and other things of this nature, that religion feels threatened and will start losing more and more of their faithful?
I think there's definitely a degree of that. I mean, I was in the church world in the 80s when it was it became a focus to get involved politically. Like getting on school boards, infiltrating them, become the dog catcher, just getting in these very small levels and influencing government that way, which we can do as well, but again, we've got to be careful because and it's not necessarily what you're asking me, but what I've noticed, especially recently, is we've become so narrow-minded where we don't reach out to the traditional libertarian or conservative non-believers, and I love to argue politics more than anyone else, but we've got to broaden our tents and realize that we do have some common goals, and we can't continue to look like we are just all this same leftist, movement. We've got to broaden our tents. We've got to infiltrate government. I mean, it's a military-sounding thing, but it's something that we're lacking, and I think we're going in the wrong direction.
If I can jump to a different topic here, one of the things that you mentioned, maybe you can go into a little more depth, is when you leave religion is a very different process than when you jump into it. And so you can talk from a personal level or just from your experience and what you've learned with people. What is that difference? Do you jump into it for an intellectual reason or for an emotional reason, and why do you leave it? And just draw that contrast.
It's funny. One of my biggest pet peeves, I think, every time I'm interviewed by a Christian radio show or just even talking to believers who find out that I'm an atheist and I was once a believer, the first question is, "Oh, what happened?" As if something horrible had to happen to me for me to become an atheist. When it's the exact opposite. It's something happened that caused me to be a believer. It's because I was desperate. I was at rock bottom and saying, "Jesus, save me." That's because things happen. Experiences and things, and maybe some bad experiences, might cause us to start questioning things or to allow reason into that little God box. But I don't know anyone who has made the decision or realized that they were an atheist without it becoming a emotion or putting emotion aside and it being an intellectual decision, and it's the exact opposite. There is a lot of fear associated with it, especially if you're taught about hell. But it's not because something happened. Yeah, we always, you had a bad experience. Somebody was mean to you in church, and yeah, those things happen. But that's not why we're. Or if we are, that's the wrong reason.
And can you say something about the God delusion in terms of your personal journey out of that and back to the reality-based community? You said that book sort of helped you. Talk about that a little.
I was probably an atheist for 2 or 3 years before I ever acknowledged it. You guys got some bad press. The only time I ever heard the word atheist was associated with communism or something. I had no idea what it was, like most people do. And it'd be like I don't believe in God, but I would never call myself an atheist. And when I picked up the God delusion when I was in my family was in town Thanksgiving or something, and I saw it in a bookstore, and I picked it up, and I pretended I left something in the store, like my keys or something. So I went back in and snuck and bought it, and came home and started reading it over a few weeks. And in the very opening, when Dawkins says, if he does his job right, once you read this, you're gonna at least think about things and blah blah. I forgot how he words it, but that scared the hell out of me, literally, And but he was right. I mean, by reading that book, I was able to at least acknowledge I was an atheist and realize that there wasn't this non-overlapping magisterium, as Stephen Jay Gould always famously said. That we can and should be very open and out with our and just but change the world from being a good influence on people. I mean, it's just I can't express enough how much that made me acknowledge my atheism, but then also motivated me to really help reach other people.
Okay.
We're going to have to take a break here, but we will be right back with Richard Haynes to talk more about just about everything we can think of under the sun.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday.
Okay.
Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay. This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue, but the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that! That's disgusting! Oh, poop already! You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Hey, welcome back. Richard, I'm going to ask you, our producer is saying that we're losing you off the screen. If you could sort of readjust and sit up a little bit so we don't lose you. And I believe Rob
sit forward toward that mic, and meanwhile we will entertain you with a question that you can think about as you're adjusting
yourself.
I know that we had that chance to talk when Richard Dawkins was here, and one of the things that you had mentioned was that the church did not exactly embrace your awakening and enlightenment. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, how for religion in a sense did get you through some very difficult and trying times. But it wasn't like you finally saw the light and they embraced it and said, Richard, we're so glad that you've thought about this, you've read about this, and you're growing personally. How did they react to you coming to your realizations about what religion was?
Well, when I first left the church, it was more of a, like I said, I was still a believer, and our church was in scandal. We were one of the first mega churches. And when we left, we were breaking covenant with God. We were outcast. I knew some things scandal-wise that never was in the public, and we got death threats from people. I don't know if it had something to do with the actual people in the church, or at least in authority or somewhat, but it was a pretty harrowing experience. And then once I became or acknowledged my atheism, speaking with people who were still in the church, it became a very big, it was just because you were wounded or whatnot, and you've allowed, Satan to deceive you. Because, one of the biggest enemies to faith is reason, as they say. So it was, it was a mess all around, I could say.
We're still losing your chin a little bit, but
I don't know. Yeah, it's bouncing all around on me too, so I don't know what's going on. On my screen, I see everything fine, but then when I see myself on here, it's moving around.
We lose you.
You're not blaming us, are you?
Yeah,
it couldn't possibly be us. So, in terms of how people react to you, I know one of the things you mentioned, and also other people who have left Christianity and become atheists, they're often told, well, you were never really a Christian in the first place, or you weren't the right sort of Christian, or you really didn't ever believe. And yet you say, you felt it, you felt this sort of physical presence. And I've heard that from a lot of people who became Christian, who were born again at one time, and then talk about this physical response. And tell us a little bit about that and what you think that may have been.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that's really gets frustrating to me, and really kind of makes me angry when people say, "Oh, well, you were never really saved." Because I had the personal relationship with Jesus. When I prayed, I could feel His presence. I could get lost in worship, all these things. It is a pretty big pet peeve. And then you have the other side of as once saved, always saved. So I guess that means that I'm still okay.
That's the back door. That's the back door thing.
It's good now. I can get away with anything I would like now.
Okay. And in terms of it's one thing too, I've heard from religious people who have argued that until you've experienced Jesus coming into your life or God coming into your life, that if you experience the feeling, the physical feeling, the mental euphoria, then you would understand, and you would of course believe, and you would never doubt it. But I'm wondering, are there things now, being an atheist, that you feel that same sort of, is it awe, is it a feeling of wonder? What is that feeling that might be described to someone who doesn't believe, that gives you that same sense? Or is there anything?
I know what you mean. I think about this a lot because I can very easily get lost in a poem or in some music, or even thinking and watching my children, looking at the universe, learning all. We you just saw the article that said there's possibly 40 billion planets just in our galaxy that could have life. Things like that that are just mind. I mean, it blows you away. Yeah, and so that sense of awe, you can really get there. And there is a thing to this, whether you call it meditation or whatever, that you can actually kind of just cast your cares upon the universe, so to speak. You know, that you can just say, hey, I can't handle this. I'm just letting it go, and I'm just going to trust it's going to be okay, without having to do some magical prayers or something. So it's still there. It's different, though, because you don't have that same delusion or deception that you know yourself, that the inner voice that you hear is actually God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that the science of the brain that's coming out right now, why we think the way we do, is just, that's awe-inspiring to me. And I just wish I had more time to read all this stuff and try to digest it. And I don't understand, I guess never having really been religious in that way, how anybody would be willing to surrender the beauty of reality and all this incredible stuff that we figured out and that these scientists spend all these decades working on. They work it out piece by piece, you know, all of them together. And it's just beautiful, and it's amazing how our brain is built. It's amazing that we can figure it out. Mm-hmm. So I think there's plenty of us that feel this sense of awe and wonder without needing, you know, some pretend stuff. I mean, I like fantasy too. I love mythology, but I don't confuse it with reality.
Well, you know, though, the thing we have to keep in mind, like for myself, when you're, you know, have a really rough life and you know, thoughts of suicide every day and the abuse from family and all these things, you don't really see the all of the universe. So the idea that you can be saved, or that somehow or another you can be transformed, is a big selling point, and it will cause many people who are very intelligent to create that little God box and to become Christians. And it's worked for millennia. You know, I mean, it's something that is very sincere. And I think we have to acknowledge that, especially people who've never experienced it, and then teach them why they believe what they believe and how they believe, but then also have something that can go in there and replace it.
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just that whole concept of giving it up to God. In some research that I've done, it's very interesting of how people want a sense of control, and they, by giving up their control to God, they actually feel in more control, is what the data are sort of suggesting, that they have made a conscious decision to give up their problems to God, and therefore things will get better. And I can imagine that probably does seem like some sort of relief. I mean, we would go to a friend or our loved one and talk about our problems and just want to, you know, hand that over to them and say, help me, or at least talk to me. And, you know, that part of religion I can see being incredibly appealing.
Yeah, you know, there's Romans 8:28, to throw a Bible verse in here. It's you know, but God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God and those who call according to his purpose. And that always, I mean, in the midst of some really bad situations, that verse could go over in my mind, that God's going to make all this work out for good, that this evil that I'm experiencing, for lack of a better word, that it was going to be a part of ministry for me, and that it was going to be this, you know, thing that God would make good. And yeah, I mean, that was such an intoxicating idea, and allowed me to cope through these situations.
You know, maybe you can talk about, and this wasn't your experience. I know you said you were originally fairly non-religious until you hit trouble as a teenager, then turned to religion. But Andy Thompson and Richard Dawkins have talked about this, how devastating it is that we indoctrinate our children and you hammer these notions in. Again, as somebody from the outside, I find it hard to understand that somebody deep down in their gut really thinks they're a sinner, really thinks they're evil, really thinks they need salvation, really thinks they might go to hell. Can you speak to that again? Because again, I don't want to be like a cold atheist that just can't identify with that, because I guess that really is a real life-driving feeling for a lot of religious people.
Well, you know, I used to always joke, even when I was in the church, that when somebody became a Christian, it's always, you know, well, life's horrible. Jesus would have died just for you. Your life can be better. You can live forever. Come accept Jesus. You accept Jesus. Go. Now here's the fine print. We forgot to tell you all these things you have to do. And that's it's pretty deceptive because you've already signed the contract at that point. And so that idea of sin and things, what I didn't even have a concept of that either. I mean, it didn't make sense to me. But once I got into the church, and they start saying, okay, well, you are infected with this thing. This is why you have sorrow and suffering in your life. And so you need the antidote, which is more Jesus. And you, all of a sudden, everything that's natural is bad and evil. And so, you're stuck. You've got this continual junkie attitude that you have to constantly be saved. So it does appeal. But any kid, you talk about indoctrinating kids. You take any 6-year-old kid that's never heard a Bible story and you read them to them, they're not going to believe it at all. They're going to think they're no different than Mother Goose. You have to totally indoctrinate a kid when it's a very young child to believe these stories. And that's why the church does it, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a child, I know you and I talked about this, for a child reading the Old Testament, to me, is what made me not believe in God as a child, because I just found them so horrific, and that I couldn't imagine that I could be nicer than God, and God seemed like a pretty awful creature to go slaughtering, everyone on earth except for a handful of people on a boat, and as well as not to mention all the genocide and the she-bears killing small children for tormenting the bald guy. It's a pretty horrific thing, and but that is also how you get children to be fearful, and that fear can drive someone to believe, and even though they see that it is unreasonable, that fear eventually prevents them from considering it in a rational way. And I think fear is one of our most basic emotions psychologically. It's probably the first emotion that evolved is fear.
Yeah, it's very true. And I always even had a problem with the verse that said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And that never made sense to me, even as a believer. But it's so true, because it is all wrapped around fear. And the fear of hell, which is the original terroristic threat, is a very real fear to people. And I can't stress enough how many times, even when you would doubt, they say you should doubt everything. You say that even as a believer. But many times when I would read something or hear something or even question God's love because of hell, you had to rebuke it. That was the devil. So you even teach yourself that, how did the devil tempt Jesus? By quoting scripture to him and telling him, the Bible says this or whatever. So, you get into this environment where any type of doubt or even reason for that matter becomes the enemy.
Going in that vein of the vicious, evil God, you had a great video on your site. I had two questions. One is, do you coordinate your videos at all with Richard Dawkins' site, or is this a totally separate area that people in the atheist and secular community to go to find some information? And the specific video that I really liked or hated was with Brian Fisher from the American Family Association, saying how the AFA was declared a hate organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and how that's, it's ridiculous. And then you watch some of the hateful venom that he spits out for 10 straight minutes. Is he typical of mainline preaching? Is that just a very radical branch? And he just says some horrible, vicious things on and on.
No, I don't think he's typical. I think that he, there's a side of that. I think most Christians, at least American evangelicals, should I say, aren't even as extreme as Sarah Palin. They're actually pretty good people. They, they love you. They love their family. They want the world to be a better place. They just think they have all the answers, and that as much as they might enjoy you, have you over for a barbecue, you're going to be tortured for eternity for not believing what they believe. So there's a little bit of a difference there.
But why don't they denounce and renounce these guys? Or do they? Is it broadly when some, if he comes out and says some just nasty stuff, do most evangelicals and other ministers get up and say, this guy is not us, this is not Christ's message?
Not as much as they should, no. They should do it a lot more, and that's something that I've stressed many times to ministers that they should. They'll come out against, a Fred Phelps or somebody to that extreme. Who the Phelps people actually understand the Bible pretty well. They're probably more faithful to the Scripture than most traditional believers are.
And that's one of the things that's interesting. The sort of mellowing of Christianity for the last 2,000 years. It's slowly been transformed through the Enlightenment and has reconstructed itself. And of course, what I was told, the Old Testament stories, they're just stories. Don't worry about it. It's it's about peace and love, and you can love God however you want, and so on. Sort of the liberal take on religion, and that's how I think most Americans want to think about religion. But this new sort of going back to the fundamentalist, brimstone and fire, and everyone's going to hell, and America's going to hell in a handbasket, and the Sarah Palins and the Michelle Bachmans seem to have caused this whole new wave of a new brand, or old brand, perhaps we should say, of Christianity. But that may not be such a bad thing, because at least it shows what the depth of religion, unchecked by human morality, what can actually happen.
Yeah, I agree. That's there's a talk I do. It's available on YouTube from the AAA convention that we were at about, thank God America's a secular nation. And it's because of the Enlightenment and having a secular government that's been able to challenge the church and purify it. Because, the church has changed and evolved their morals along with this secular government, to where if the church was in power, they would never be able to have people who can stand up and explain problems with the way that their theology worked out, like with slavery and women's rights and whatnot. And if there's a way that we can, help them do that, is to help them appreciate and understand that we are a secular nation, and they should be thankful for that, because they learn new things about the Bible. It's like slavery's obviously condoned in the Bible, but then afterwards, after slavery's done away with and the civil rights, they go, the Bible also says we're neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek. We didn't realize that. They did the same thing with women's rights. They'll do the same thing again with gay rights. 20 years from now, I've been saying this for years, 20 years from now, when everyone most people accept homosexual marriage, there will be this movement amongst the church saying, we didn't really understand what the Scripture was. God was always okay with it to begin with. And they go through all the scriptures, they're already doing it and explaining why they didn't fit. There's websites now that talk about where it says that man should not lie with another man as he does a woman. Well, that means that he lies with a woman, so it's not homosexual sex that's wrong, it's heterosexuals having homosexual sex that's wrong. It's just ridiculous, but this is what they'll do. They'll go through all these scriptures, the Christian apologists will get to work, and they'll adjust and change, and then it's always been a part of God's plan.
Right.
They'll evolve with the morals.
The other Richard Dawkins made a comment that the new Pope, like with Pope Francis, has obviously taken a much more humanitarian view on a lot of things, and maybe that's not in the secular and atheist community's best interest, because he might make religion, for all of its misguided base, if you have somebody at the top that can actually lead them to do better things, it's not going to be quite as transparent how bigoted they are against gays and against women and against all these different things. So I don't know if you have any opinions on that, or about Pope Francis, if you think that he's very genuine in some of these offerings, or if this is part of it.
I think he's genuine, but I believe what he said, he didn't say these issues weren't important anymore. He just said, let's don't focus on them.
Right.
Right, that was key.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think people miss that. It's not like all of a sudden they're going to allow gay people to come into the church and that, women can become priests and all these things. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's a marketing
he is
ploy.
a step in the right direction. I think he would be even better off if he would allow his predecessor to answer some charges that have been brought against him.
Right.
I think that's one of the greatest crimes in history, and it's being swept under the table right now. But that guy who made those decisions is still around. He might have stepped down, but he's still living in some luxury.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing what any good PR person would do, which is let's change the subject. Let's push that aside and start talking about the more positive things, and everybody will forget it because, of course, and we do. The public has this 5-minute memory of what's going on, and so once something gets taken out of the focus, I mean, most of the lawsuits have probably been spent and paid for, and so the pedophile priest issues are not. It's not coming up in the news. The financial issues with the Vatican are, not being pushed on the news media. We've got more important things to look at that the news is going to push on us, like the baby that the Prince of England had, and those kind of things are going to be more important things.
Right, and these are still the ultra-conservative cardinals that put Pope Francis in there. I think we need to remember that. And as much as you sort of like to hope this guy is really a decent guy, I certainly do see the danger of people letting religion off now because at least this guy's not as fanatically evil.
I've known lots of very nice priests and very nice that were really genuinely good people, and there are, I'm sure, a lot of priests who are good people. They're not all pedophiles. They're not all hiding things. They actually joined the priesthood or have joined the clergy, as I'm talking with a lot of the ex-clergy members. They went into it for all the good reasons. And the corruption of religion, unfortunately, has caused so much additional harm, and it also tries to tell people that the only way you can do these good things is by joining religion, that they have the monopoly on, if you want to help people in the world, you have to join a religion in order to do that. And in some ways, they're kind of right, because the secular world, while we do have a lot of good nonprofits, we don't get the same sort of loyal following that we see among religious people, and they do want to do good in the world. I genuinely believe that their religion doesn't necessarily make you a bad person.
Richard, we've got a few minutes left. One thing I want to ask about, I saw somewhere on your site or one of the letters that you were working on a book. Can you tell us what that book's going to be about, what community it's for?
Yes, the working title currently is The A Word. Understanding, Embracing, and Defending Atheism. It's going to be kind of a how-to book for those who are new to atheism. What do they do? How do they understand things? When in the church we always had new members classes. That you teach people the basics of it. So it's quite an endeavor, a lot more than I thought it would be initially, because I'm trying to go through a lot of the old philosophical writings and a lot of the current, even the current books, and trying to come up with a kind of like a how-to book, for lack of a better word, and then also for people who are used to being in an atheist, I guess, how to present arguments and how to what do you say to your neighbors and things like that. So
is it also the fine print now? You now become an atheist, so here's the fine print of what you have to do. Please send in your donation to the Road to Reason to keep us going. Please send in your donation to Atheist Nexus and so on. So we got to have that. You got to have that fine print. See, look, it's easy. That's the fine print. Help us keep going.
The good thing about our atheist church is we only charge 6.66% of your income, which is really good
instead of the 10. That's nice of us. It's funny. Edwina Rogers had made some point months ago at for us American Atheists, maybe the vast amounts of money coming in from the religious right compared to, I think, the secular all
the little drop.
Was
the
a drop.
drop.
It was like
yeah.
100th or 1,000.
It's ridiculous.
And so how do we compete? And you had something interesting I saw on your site that if people shop through Amazon at your site, a little bit of that goes to help support you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm very happy to say that we very seldom have to do any fundraising. We rely on advertising and then the Google ads, of course, and through things like that, especially with the holidays coming up. If you go through our site, there's a button you can click on, and when people buy things, we get a small percentage. And around this time of year, it's pretty substantial. It gives us enough to at least support.
To buy your refrigerator through Amazon through Atheist Nexus is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And if you have to buy the Sarah Palin book, at least do it through some organization that supports secularism.
Yeah.
I may actually have to buy it so I can do a review of it, and I hate doing that. It just eggs me the wrong way. But oh well.
Can you say something about? I saw that you set up Atheist Nexus, where you have to at least declare that you're a non-theist. Can you explain why you made that decision and what it's done in terms of giving a safe place for people to talk and less spam? How you've handled that?
Well, it's very interesting because that was a big controversial thing in the beginning. But there are so many sites online where you can debate and argue. You got Facebook. Anytime someone posts something that doesn't jive with traditional religion, you get tons of posts and stuff. So we thought, well, we're going to be you're a non-theist only. And then, which means you can be agnostic or an atheist, whatever you want to be. And, we're there as a support group. That has ended up being a tremendous asset because we have thousands of people ex-Muslims in the Muslim countries currently who have joined Atheist Nexus and feel safe. We've got about 30,000 or so active members, and we've banned or kicked out probably 10 to 12,000 people. So it's a very active thing we do to keep theists out, and it's spammers, of course. And like I said, there's plenty of places you can go and debate, but it's provided a safe zone to where people who aren't very comfortable coming out of the closet yet can come and they can set up an account and not have to worry about, like I said, being discovered on Facebook, something like that.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. We had a great time, learned a lot of interesting information. Please join us next week on Road to Reason. See you then.
Don't forget, PayPal. You can send us some money.
PayPal almost the check for today.
Here.
Right, give me that guy.
It's warm.
Oh, that is nice and warm. Yeah, it was so funny.